The United States is the only country on earth that sentences children to die in prison.
You're stuck in a hole and there's no way for you to climb out, no light up there or anything.
How young is too young for a child to go to prison for life?
Your sentence is to remain in prison until you die.
Kids ought to be given a second chance.
You are throwing away the key to this life that could possibly be something really great later on.
A decision just released by the U.S. Supreme Court will change the way juveniles are sentenced.
The highest body that determines those constitutional questions before us is the U.S. Supreme Court.
Once you get to know a kid in juvenile hall and you know their background and you get to know them personally, to see that they're getting sentenced to life without the possibility of parole makes you really quite angry inside.
We got about 90 guys off, formerly incarcerated. They're amazing. Architects, we got MDs, we got...
When you tell people that kids from 14 to 17 get life sentences to die in prison, they're amazed and shocked.
It's really throwing away their life and just saying, you don't have any importance, you don't have any contribution to make to our community, to our society.
I've been an organizer activist for many years. I know all too well what young people experience growing up in the neighborhood. I was a victim of sexual abuse and physical abuse as a kid growing up in my household, and it creates a callous heart and trust issues, and sometimes out of that trauma we perpetrate acts that we don't really understand.
Because kids are uniquely capable of change, the vast majority of them age out of criminal behavior.
Children are in their developmental stages.
You're cognitive of some of the things that you do, but sometimes you don't really understand the magnitude of what your actions may carry.
We know scientifically that juveniles are different. Physiologically, they're different from adults. Psychologically, they're different from adults. They, more than their adult counterparts, are capable of great dramatic change. Cintoya Brown was a case that I worked on while I was an appellate prosecutor. She was 16 years old when she committed the crime. It was a first-degree premeditated murder case. And then a few months later, I started teaching a class, judicial process, at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And it escaped my notice that Cintoya Brown was in my class. Cintoya loved it. She was one of my best students, very bright, very engaged, always happy to share her opinions, contribute to the discussion. And this critique of the criminal justice system really resonated with her. Cintoya is not the same person that she was. She's an amazing college student, and she's very kind and very compassionate. She cares a great deal about people. Cintoya is an excellent example of somebody who, less than a decade later, I would have no reservations about recommending her for parole.
If we take that message, we are called to go into our states and figure out, how do we as a society want to hold young people accountable without having to impose these extreme sentences?
SB 9 is a bill that I authored, and what it does is to give kids who are in prison for the rest of their life without the possibility of parole a second chance. This is not a sort of get out of jail free card.
We're not talking about automatic releasing people after 15 years or 20 years. We're talking about giving an opportunity.
What we need to do today is stand up for the victims.
I urge a no vote again.
We want them out of our community. We want them out of our lives.
Not everybody wants to see the trend going in this direction. Not everybody agrees with it. And as a result, we have to be prepared to deal with those folks.
You've got to understand that this is going to be a tough road. And so part of dealing with that is you've got to work with the opposition with some sense of strength on your part, that there are some things you can give, but there are other things you're not going to be able to give at all.
From a faith-based perspective, there is a piece that's really connected to every faith tradition. It's related to redemption and preferential love for our children and taking care of the most marginalized.
Jewish scriptures and the Christian writings, and indeed the great teachings of our Muslim faith and many other faiths, Buddhists, and all of the great people that I work with. It is about the opportunity for renewal, for forgiveness, for second chances.
There is a religious piece of it for folks that no young person is beyond redemption and don't believe that we should be giving up on our children.
All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote.
SB 9 brought all kinds of emotions. And finally, at the last minute, at the last second, it hinged on one individual.
Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 34. Measure passes.
California presents an incredible model for other states because it was a very comprehensive and sophisticated coalition that was built over a number of years.
We worked a long time on this bill. It took us more than 5 years to ultimately pass SB 9.
People who were sent to prison with absolutely no hope of ever getting out, no incentive for doing well, now can live with this hope, and their families can live with this hope that there is an opportunity for them now.
I think the most meaningful parts of it for me were hearing from family members, mothers who, for the first time, let themselves think that maybe they'll live to see their son, come home.
This country has got to change its attitude in terms of how we deal with kids in these really difficult situations.
Other states are looking to California with the hopes of following the example.
For people in other states who are not where we are in California, the first thing I would say is to just realize that you're not in this alone.
This is so much bigger than a legislative bill. This movement is so much bigger than SB 9.
We're all in this together. We want to end juvenile life without parole across the United States.
In every state, yes, laws are different, but we learn from one another and we share.
It's essential that any campaign is grounded in the communities that are most affected by the human rights violation that you're trying to correct. It really happens kind of one by one by one.
You really have to put together a diverse coalition. We had the legal advocates, the legislative advocates, but we also had victims of crime.
On February 12, 1993, I received a call telling me that my only child had been murdered. They started having the court sessions, and I got to see who this 16-year-old boy was. And I think the hatred began to set in. The judge ended up giving him 25.5 years in prison. He didn't want to see a young man go to prison for the rest of his life. And I ended up telling O'Shea, look, I forgive you. I know that O'Shea is my spiritual son, and I am so thankful and grateful that I am not the person that I was when this first happened.
She's definitely helping me get better because I've always been emotionally closed off. Only thing I could show is anger. And now I've learned how to express compassion. I've learned how to be a loving person.
He's turned his life around. He was a child. He was 16 years old, and he deserves another chance.
For us to be able to not only share our story, but people can see how genuine we are and how sincere we are and how important and powerful it can be to forgive. I think that's what the world needs right now.
I think the Supreme Court decision, SB 9, all of that has sort of sparked a lot of interest as to whether or not in other states we should still continue this arcane Stone Age thinking, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, even for kids.
I'm committed to working with that population of young folks to ensure that they get an opportunity to give back to that which they've taken from them.
I believe in redemption. I believe, based on my 13 years on the bench, based on being a mother of 3, that people in fact do change.
I think my situation would have been a lot worse had I been given life without the possibility of parole. I know how bitter I would have been had I gotten a sentence like that, but there was that little glimmer of hope that made me start to nurture other relationships that I had with people, that encouraged me to learn more about myself, who I was, and why I respond and react to the things that I do. But knowing that one day I might just have that chance can make so much of a difference in someone's life.